Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Town Hall number 17. I can't believe we've done so many of these so far. Hi, Juan. How are you doing?
Hi, Mike. Hi, everyone. Great to see you all today.
Yeah. So we are in the, I think many of you are in the project phase and in the middle of the project phase, and I've seen lots of kind of email going back and forth about office hours and things like that. So hopefully everyone's getting the support that they need. I know it is a big transition going through to working with teams, and a lot of you are remote with each other and don't know each other, but I think it's a really good learning experience. My number one suggestion was to make some buddies with your fellow teammates and figure out how to really connect with each other and work together. So and that'll really improve your experience a lot. So we are in week number. This is the 6th week, I think, of kind of the project phase, and we're going to go for 4 more weeks, including this one right here. And the next up is a virtual internship, which is going to start on August 16th. So there'll be some mail going out to kind of invite people to those. At least that's the current plan right now. Is that right, Juan?
Yes, that's the plan. Upon successful completion of the phase 2, which is the project phase, our participants will get invited to the internship phase, which will be the last and concluding phase of the of the current program.
Right. Great. So we're also working behind the scenes to kind of like analyze how the program has gone so far and what we might change in the future. So really appreciate everybody's help in making this program, improving it along the way, and giving us some ideas about how to make it better in the future. So anyway, today, do you have anything else to say, Juan, or?
No, I think that's everything for now.
Okay, great. So today we have Mike Coleman with us, and he is a developer advocate who works for Google. So we'll find out a little bit about that. But good morning, Mike. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm well. I mean, it's Monday, right? So well is relative, but
that's true. And like for some reason, I don't know why. We decided to schedule these for 8 a.m. Monday morning. It seems kind of masochistic, but that's what we've done. So anyway, it gives some people something to do where they can just kind of chill out and not have to think too hard. You can just watch some video.
Hopefully it's a good conversation for folks.
Yeah, I've so much enjoyed this, talking to people as I've done a bunch of these, and it's really, to me, it's really fascinating. So your career is pretty fascinating too. It's like looking at your LinkedIn profile. You've been working for a long time, and you seem to have kind of ticked a lot of the big tech company boxes. Maybe we can go back and talk about like how did you get started in wanting to be in software engineering and that related things like that?
I mean, it depends on how far you want to go back, right? So I've been doing this for many years, and it actually started walking into an electronics store when I first saw one of the early Apple computers, and I just turned to a friend of mine. I'm like, that's what I want to do. And so I've been blessed in that regard, right? This is all I've ever wanted to do. I was in computer club in high school, which made me extremely popular with the ladies, as you can imagine. And from there,
was that an Apple II that you were interested in?
Yeah, I didn't really want to say that, but yeah, it was Apple II, Apple IIe, something like that.
Oh no! Like I'm older. I'm about 10 years older than you are. So
Apple IIe.
I was into Apple II as well. So. Yeah.
And we were lucky in my high school, right? We were one of the first high schools for some reason we got a grant, and we had at that point we had Radio Shack TRS-80s, and then we had PCs. But I was able to start working on computers when I was like, 13, 14 years old, which is the norm today, of course, but for a lot of kids. But for us back in the day, that was a pretty special thing. And so I've always just enjoyed it. I actually started my career working at the metals plant that my dad worked at. He was a steel worker, and I was hired to hook up all the computers. And so I started in networking and systems engineering. Did that for a bunch of years, and then kind of left that place and went to Intel. That was my first big tech company, and I worked there as a site systems operator.
Did you
So
get
I
a
was
degree along the way? Where are you
I did,
trained
yeah.
in?
So I got an associate's degree in computer science, and then I went and got a bachelor's degree in information systems, and then I went and got an MBA.
Oh, wow.
Mostly
Okay.
because I love learning, right? And so I think the MBA was my midlife crisis, honestly. Like
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
go buy a sports car. I went back to school. But yeah, I raised a family and worked full time and went to school. So I imagine that's a challenge that a lot of your folks are facing, as they try to manage multiple priorities in their life. And so, yeah, so I was building systems, building networks, troubleshooting them. And at some point I went to Intel and did that for them. And then I went to HP, Hewlett Packard, did that for them. And then I sort of made a transition from HP to Microsoft, where I went from deploying and testing and building systems to selling them. So Microsoft hired me into a role which is called a sales engineer.
Okay.
And the way I explain that to folks is the sales person would be at the table with the customer, and the customer would be like, well, does your software do this? And he would turn to me and I would go, yes, it does. Or I'd say, no, it doesn't. And then he would turn back to the customer, no, it doesn't. Or yes, it does.
Yeah.
So I was basically the technical resource in the room, and I really enjoyed that. Spent a bunch of time at Microsoft.
I've heard that role also, that you actually help solve customer problems a little bit more directly. Is that?
Yeah, I was certainly being
addressing?
facetious. Yeah, so in the role, really what you do, and it's interesting, right? Because I can see a lot of folks will come out of coding boot camps or more formal education or self-taught, and they don't realize that there's this myriad of roles that you can do with that technical education, right? One of them is a role like a sales engineer.
Yeah.
And your job is to go in with the sales team to help identify customer problems, and then set up proof of concepts or sort of demonstrations of how the technology can apply to that specific customer's problem. And I got to call on some really fun customers, right? And that was one of my favorite parts of that job. Was my background had always been tech, but one minute I'm talking to Boeing, the next minute I'm talking to Nike, the next minute you're talking to Starbucks, and you're learning about all these different businesses.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anything about manufacturing airplanes or manufacturing tennis shoes or selling coffee, but in speaking with those customers, I got to learn a lot about different businesses, which I always thought was really kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it's almost sounds
so
like
that's kind of
like working
from
at a
there.
consultant.
Yeah, it's a pre-sales consultant role.
Yeah. Like I can think of some of the big consulting firms, like where your career there would be, like working with a client. You might work with a client for quite a long time on something in depth, but sounds like you get kind of like a taste of that, getting to see what other companies will like.
And that's one thing. I actually never was a consultant, but I have friends that have done consulting and they really like it for the same reason, right? The exposure to multiple businesses, the exposure to different technology stacks, different problems. Anything you can do in your development to get yourself exposed to a variety of languages or variety of stacks, it just serves you well down the road, because there's very, very, very few shops that aren't polyglot, right? Aren't multiple languages, multiple stacks. Nobody's just a Node shop or just a Java shop or just a Rails or whatever it ends up being. So there I basically went into a bunch of roles around sales engineering. I did some product management, and I also did some and then I've done a lot of technical marketing and evangelism, and that's what I've been doing. So I went from Microsoft, and then I was at VMware for a while, which they sort of invented virtualization, and then I went and worked for a couple of startups, Puppet here in Portland, which does systems automation and systems management software. And then I went to work for Docker, they basically popularized container technology. Then I went to AWS, and then I ended up here at Google. So
awesome.
That's been that kind of the roller coaster.
Yeah. So yeah, I think one of the interesting things that we could talk about today that will be interesting to people is the identification of like different roles and how, I think some people have, maybe a very narrow view of like what a software engineer might be and what kind of jobs you might have. But you've landed on something that's actually, I don't think we've ever talked about before, this kind of idea developer advocate. Can you define what does that role mean, and what's your day-to-day like?
Yeah, 100%. Sure. So there's a woman in the field, her name is Mary Thangval, and she defines it as, to the customer I represent the company, to the company I represent the customer. And so I sit at that sort of nexus, and it's my I say it's my job, but it's just really, it's a lot of fun. Really. I get paid to learn technologies and then create and deliver technical material on those technologies, right? So I will do a workshop, or I'll do a blog post, or I'll do videos up on YouTube, or I'll speak at conferences. And the job there is, I'm not really trying to sell you anything, because I'm not in sales. I'm in engineering. I sit on the engineering team at Google. I'm there to get you excited and to maybe broaden your horizons a little bit on technologies you weren't aware of and how you could leverage them in your day-to-day. Ideally for me, I like that role because it affords me the opportunity to experience what I call our light bulb moments, right? So if I'm sitting down in a one-on-one or in a room of people and I start explaining a concept or talking about how you can approach a problem, I'll see people, and literally we'll see light bulbs go up over their head, right? And then when they come up to me afterwards, they're like, I've been struggling with how I could approach this, or I didn't understand that, and now I do, and now I'm excited, and I'm gonna go build something. That is really cool. And the other part that comes out of that is, those same conversations can often have components like, well, I tried this before and I couldn't use your technology because it didn't meet my needs here, here, and here, right? And so if you go and do, a couple dozen talks over the course of a year, and you hear the same 3 or 4 things over and over again, then you realize your product's got some shortcomings. So it's my job to go back to the engineering team and the product management team and say, look, here's what I've heard. Right. I've heard that our usability isn't good. I've heard that, you need to have long running processes, and we've made this sort of for like functions as a service, but it's not really what the customer needs. We've been focusing on Java applications, but actually what I'm seeing is more people are doing it with Python or whatever it is. And so then you go back and you work with the engineering teams to bring those concerns and those areas of improvement, so that you get this really great virtuous cycle where you're helping to build a better product that you get to go tell people about, who get excited about using it, and then you get more feedback, and it's this great loop.
That's cool.
It's a fun role for people. So I will tell you, me and a lot of my colleagues have backgrounds in amateur theater. Like, we enjoy that stage. I fancy myself a fledgling stand-up comedian or whatever. I actually did get feedback after one of my presentations. Someone said, lose the jokes. This isn't your personal stand-up routine. And I'm like, she won't be attending my presentations anymore.
Yeah.
But, all of us have our own personal style on the way we deliver. And it's a great role. And I know a lot of, we have a program at Google where we take non-technical Googlers and we bring them up through an internal boot camp, essentially, right?
Oh, really?
And we turn them into technical engineers. And an optional add-on to that is developer relations. And so I guess my point being is, you don't have to be senior in your career to do this role. This could be a role that you do immediately. You can come in and people are like, oh, I don't know enough, I'm not smart enough. And I think that the thing when I hear people say that is I think back to an old joke that I was told years ago, which was 2 people are in the woods and this bear comes out crashing out of the brush, and person number 1 sits down and she starts to put on her tennis shoes, and the second person, the guy, starts running away, and then he stops about 20 yards up the trail. He turns to her and goes, why are you putting on your tennis shoes? We've got to outrun this bear. And she's like, I don't have to outrun the bear, I have to outrun you. Right. And so, from the terms of like, don't ever let what you don't know hold you back. There's someone out there that you can always instruct, you can always teach, right? You're always a step ahead of somebody. And even as a way of building your personal brand, creating blog posts, creating YouTube videos, sharing your knowledge journey, how you learn along the way. That's a great way to get into a role like this. And it's a great way to give back to a community. And it's a great way to become ingrained in part of the community as well, which I think, you were talking about on the projects, find your buddy and collaborate. I just cannot emphasize how important that is. There's no software developer in any company of any size that operates on their own all the time. You're always part of a team building, collaboratively building software.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it sounds like the type of person who would really enjoy a role like you have now is you love to kind of learn new things, communicate that to other people, and that it sounds like a really fun job to me. You're kind of part teacher, part developer.
Yeah, I mean that's you definitely have the educational aspect. You have the engineering aspect. I'm not a developer in the sense that I've never written software professionally. It's my background is in operations, but that's another thing is where you can focus on different areas of how software either gets written or consumed or deployed. And because people face those challenges across the globe universally, and you can. I know people whose jobs are developer advocates in gaming, right? And so they get to work with gaming manufacturers and explain, how to use the latest, building block services to publish games. And I know people that are hardcore developer advocates in data sciences and artificial intelligence and, like me, operations, core languages, Python, anything you can think of. Almost there's a need for people to be out there espousing the virtues of that particular technology.
Yeah. Well, that's another area like we haven't actually touched on very much, I think, is the role of operations, DevOps. And it sounds like you're pretty ingrained in that world. But would you care to define that for us? And like what is a kind of a DevOps person do?
Yeah, I laugh because I think if you ask 5 different people what DevOps is, you'll get 5 different answers, right? And it's a word that people use, and I think really what it is it's born out of the way things used to be done, right? Okay. Which was there used to really be this wall between developers and operations. And operations folks are the people who take the software and actually deploy it. They build infrastructure, like they deploy servers, they deploy networks, be it physical or virtual, and then they take the code and they actually have to run it. And as a developer, right, you might write software and you may run some tests and you may run it on, you have a bank of 10 machines you run it on, and you do a certain amount of testing and scalability, but there's a big difference between even what you can simulate and what it means to run in production, right? If you think about, all of us, I shouldn't say all of us, but many of us use Netflix, right? Or we use Facebook or Pinterest. And to run applications at that scale, you're dealing with, thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of servers distributed globally across the world. And someone has to be able to update that software and deploy that software, and they have to monitor that software, and they have to look for, patterns and things, and they have to predict breakages before they happen. And so what DevOps has done is try to remove that silo and make it so that the operation of the software is very closely tied to the development of the software. And there's a bunch of things in there. Things like continuous integration and continuous delivery systems, which is like we don't go and install software. We update the repo and it goes through a bunch of automated testing and it rolls out on its own, right?
Yeah.
Those sort of things. There's things like site reliability engineering, which is a practice that a lot of the early work in that came out of Google and our SREs. And it's how do you write software that's self-healing? How do you build metrics that make sense? How do you observe software at scale so that you, like I said, you can predict breakages before they happen? How do you intentionally break things? There's a whole discipline called chaos engineering, where you're working on, your whole job is to figure out ways to inject chaos into the system to see how the system reacts, right? So you may do things like just pull power plugs on servers, right? Or you may inject a whole bunch of traffic. So, DevOps, and then there's a whole security component of it. Like, how do you secure against different attacks? And so operations is truly fascinating. I mean, it really, really is. And you don't have companies like Google or Pinterest or Facebook or Netflix or Amazon.com or any of these websites that we all use every day that for the most part work seamlessly. You don't have that without having really talented, smart, genius level people running the stuff behind the scenes. Like I'm passionate about operations. Because I think a lot of people don't think about it, but we all benefit.
How do you think, like, as someone who's new, maybe thinking about a career change or just starting out, how would one get into DevOps? It sounds like you have to know so much, like is it just a bunch of neckbeards working in that role, or do they are there roles for people who are like just coming up to get?
Yeah, I mean, there's always roles for people just coming up, because I have a slogan that I use a lot, or a phrase I use a lot, which is we're all junior engineers. On any given day, we're a junior engineer. But a big part of my job is to be a junior engineer on technology, and I come with a background and a frame of reference, but I don't know a lot of things, and I come up to speed on them. And yes, you can be a DevOps engineer, and you could say, I'm going to focus on cloud infrastructure, and so you're going to go learn Terraform, right? And you're going to become a Terraform engineer, right? And then once you have learned how to deploy servers, deploy networking infrastructure, or deploy databases or whatever it is, then you can learn about how to operate and manage them, right? And maybe you operate them on a smaller scale, and your responsibilities just grow. And then you realize, oh, there's some security aspects here that I'm not really up on, but you've had a security person helping you, and they're mentoring you, and you're coming along. I would say if you're interested in operations, there are certain big buckets, right? There's infrastructure provisioning, there's monitoring and observability, there's security, right? Those sort of big buckets, you can pick one of the big buckets and say, that's what I want to focus on.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can build your skill set in that. And I'm not a security person at all, so I don't have a lot of recommendations on that. But I think if you're interested, and the other thing is, I know Google does it. I think Amazon does it as well, probably Azure as well. But the big cloud providers offer a myriad of free training on their platforms, right? So learning how to be an AWS or a Google Cloud or an Azure engineer is another way to get into operations, right?
Yeah. It seems kind of like, if I were, I come from just a kind of more software development, traditional background, old school, individual client-side application development. But, for that kind of person, you think, oh, just write a bunch of code. You can do it on your own. And you have one machine and you're writing code and you're learning how to program. It seems a lot more daunting to kind of get into the operations field. Like, you don't have like a big cloud to operate. And, what do what would your first, if you're going to crawl, walk, run, what would your first experiences be like operating, something? And, I don't know what you think about, how would you tangibly kind of get started, getting that experience that you'd need?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of what you described, only for operations. It's the same sort of thing, right? You start with, I'm just responsible for so my son went to a boot camp. He's a junior engineer at a car manufacturer, Jaguar Land Rover. Okay. And his job is to deploy the infrastructure that is used to run their QA and their automation and their testing, right? And so, initially his job was like, how do I stand up a server? Like, how do I automate that process? And using, I think if you're going to want to learn that, then I think the tool to learn is Terraform, right? Okay. And that's a tool from HashiCorp that abstracts away the underlying provider, right? So you don't have to learn how to do that in Azure and AWS and Google Cloud. Okay. You learn how to do it in Terraform, and Terraform can talk to those platforms on the back end. Okay. Right.
So how does Terraform relate to Kubernetes, Docker, things like that?
So Terraform can actually provision Kubernetes. Okay. Terraform is basically a what we call an abstraction layer, right? So one of the issues with operations is that we operate across many different systems. So most big companies are going to have a data center, and they're going to have some bare metal, and they're going to have some virtual servers running on something called like VMware, right? And they're also going to have some stuff in the cloud. And in the old, in the old way of doing it, you would be like, I am a VMware engineer, right? Yeah. And I'm an expert in VMware. Well, with something like with Terraform, you learn Terraform and you just say, Terraform, give me a server. And it says, well, where are you building the server? You're like, well, VMware. And you plug in some variables and it goes out and provisions that for you. And so the operation model, or the way you interact with different platforms is, sort of base leveled, and it's that abstraction. So you learn Terraform and you let Terraform worry about the nuances of the underlying systems. And that's the same, and there's like Puppet that I worked for, they do that for systems administration, right? There's 5 different ways to deploy packages on Linux, but if you do it in Puppet or Ansible, you do it one way and it works on 5 different versions of Linux. So that's the other area you could look at, is learn some Terraform, learn some Puppet or some Ansible, and you're a long way towards being able to do automated system sort of provisioning and maintenance and getting started. I think both of those are good.
All right.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying that I'll go ahead. I just think this kind of highlights one of the, I don't know, blessings and curses of our industry, is that things are moving really fast. Like 10 years ago, I'm guessing you wouldn't be talking about Terraform. You'd be talking about some other product. And the idea that you can like learn a skill and then like use it for the rest of your career, at least in terms of like individual technologies like that doesn't exist in our industry. Like you really kind of have to be constantly learning. So I don't know, like how do you tell people about how do you deal with the rapid pace of change in like all the things that you might need to know? I think some people might feel like, oh, how do I ever get onto this treadmill? It's moving constantly all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the things that I built my career on early, right, that I was an expert in, don't even exist anymore.
Yeah,
like literally nobody uses them, right? So if I hadn't been learning constantly, I would have been out of the job, 20 years ago, right? And it can be really, really daunting. And I suffer from this, right? I'm like, one day I'm trying to learn React, and the next day I'm trying to learn, Terraform or whatever, right? And I would say that my approach to learning is that you can't boil the ocean. You're not going to learn a new framework or something in a weekend. I would rather see you put in an hour or 2 every other day than try to put 30 hours in, right. Do it in a month of lunches. Don't try to do it over 2 days because you won't retain it. The other thing too is there's enough work and there's enough technology that if you're not focused on something you really enjoy, you should probably find something you really enjoy. And I know that that's a real privileged thing to say for a lot of people, but I do believe that in tech, and there's a lot of debate about, this idea of passion, and I'm passionate about technology. I believe that people are better doing things that they are passionate about, but I don't code on the weekends. I don't code in my free time. It used to be a hobby. It's not a hobby anymore for me. And I don't think it has to be your whole life to be successful at it, but I do think you have to enjoy it if you want to independently pursue these other technologies. In some cases, and I'm not going to say that I never study stuff outside of work hours, whatever that means anymore in a pandemic where we're all working from home.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's, this weekend I was looking at a book on learning data science with fantasy football, and I was playing around with that just because I wanted to. Like, I don't do anything with data science in my job, but it interested me. So you'll do some of that, but I think that, pick 1 or 2 things you want to focus on. Don't get distracted by everything you could learn. Focus on that thing, learn it in small bites, and try to find things that are directly or at least tangentially related to what you're working on today, so that you can find ways to apply them in your day-to-day. I think that's kind of how I approach it.
I think that's good advice. I think that in my learning style, I would have characterized, like when I started my career, especially, I would have like, if I was going to do something in a new language or something, I would like, give me the manual. I'm going to read the whole thing cover to cover, learn the whole thing, and then I will start my project. And that is actually a really bad approach, I think. You know, like you're saying, it doesn't scale to like all learning all kinds of things. And so today I'm more of a, you know, oh, hey, let me go find a Stack Overflow article that has 20 lines of code that I don't understand. I could paste it into my project and see if it works. And, you know, that progression of like, oh, okay, I'm kind of incrementally like getting exposed to what's the minimum set of things I need to know, you know, and then if I'm going to become an expert in that thing, you know, then, you know, I'm going to dig into it more and more and more and learn all the nooks and crannies of it. But yeah, I think you're right. Like you can't really boil the ocean of learning everything, but you can dip your toes into the ocean in lots of different places, and you'll probably find stuff that's really cool, fun to play with, and you'll, you know, I think letting, like when you were talking, I was thinking like, oh, if you kind of let your curiosity drive your you know, drive your interest, like if you're a curious person and you say like, oh, that looks really interesting, like go play around with that and go find a way to find 20 lines of code that you can paste into a project and start playing with it.
It's an interesting thing because, you know, there's one of the things you see come up on developer Twitter, you know, a lot is this idea of what makes a senior engineer, or, you know, or what makes a real engineer, whatever that is. And you know, be like, well, real engineers don't use Stack Overflow. Real engineers don't use Google. And that is like, the best engineers are the best Googlers, right? If you, not like the employees of Googlers, but the best users of Google. Like if you can, you know, that's like, honestly, that's probably the first thing I would learn is how to write effective Google searches, because you know, I've written a bunch of demo apps where I'm in like, I don't even know how to describe what I want to do. You know, I don't know the technical term for it. Like I didn't know the technical term for it was vision recognition. And I wanted to do something where I could take a picture of a cat and feed it into machine learning and have it tell me what kind of cat it was, for instance, right? So I had to learn how to Google terms around machine learning and model training and stuff. But Stack Overflow, and I think, you know, building on what you said, that is a real common way that I learn, which is, here's 20 lines of code that do what I think I want them to do, but what happens if I change this line? And what if I wanted to take what this spits out and I wanted to make it do something else? So now I have these two chunks of code from Stack Overflow, and then how do I marry those things up so that they do a larger, right? How do I create two functions and do this one does the recognition and this one does the output to the screen and formats it the way I want it to, right? Or writes it to a database, or, you know, I've been connecting to SQL databases. How do I use NoSQL databases? I believe that, and I do this in my career too, is that I always look for opportunities that represent a Venn diagram. A Venn diagram, on one side is what I know, and the other side is what I don't know, right? Those are the two circles in the Venn diagram. And what I look for is a healthy amount of overlap, right? Where in this new subject area, there's a bunch I don't know, but there's a little bit that I do know, right? There's a frame of reference for me to approach this new learning, and then I can build on it. And I think that's worked really well for me. I also believe that a lot of us learn in concentric circles. And if you think about it that way, it's helped me not get frustrated. So if you think about, it's raining and you know, like it's a thunderstorm and you're trying to absorb all this knowledge. I can't absorb all the knowledge. Right. So my bucket is really small, right? But then I absorb that amount of knowledge, and then my bucket gets a little bigger because I'm not worrying about the fundamentals. Now I can learn more stuff. And sometimes I have to go into a subject 3 or 4 or 5 times, that these concepts, I have to hear them 3 or 4 or 5 times, and they keep building on themselves. So if I go into something and I get frustrated right away, I'm doing myself a disservice. I have to give myself the opportunity to hear some of these things over and over again. I mean, classic example for me is React. Like I've been trying to teach myself React for a year, and I don't, I step away from it and then I come back to it and I'm like, oh, that's what that is. Oh, that's, but then the problem with like stuff like React is every time I come back to it, they've added new stuff, and
it's a moving target. Yes, that's like part of the problem.
I'm always lost.
Yeah.
So that's where consistency comes in. I have not been consistent with me trying to learn React.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that. Well, I forgot what you were saying. What were you talking about before you started to React? Just like the rain example.
Concentric circles and like,
I
think that's right. Yeah.
Just getting like a small amount of information and being able to expand from that. Because it can be really daunting to like you're not anchored in like what the topic is about, and so that's great advice. All right. So we talked a lot about like kind of where, what way, how people can kind of enter into things, and like, would you have any like advice for people who are just getting started, either in, software engineering or DevOps or things like that, or even developer advocate roles?
I mean, I think the one thing I would say, so this is an area where I wasted a lot of time and didn't, and it's not even about technology. It's about how you integrate yourself with the community, right? And how you build a network, and the importance of going out as you're learning and learning in public. There's a gentleman, there's a couple of really good examples of this for me, I believe, that I've seen from people much younger than myself in the career that have done an outstanding job of going out and giving back to the community while they learned, right? So and through that you meet a lot of people, and there's a lot of people. I think Juwan found me because I put out a Twitter post saying, look, I have worked at all these companies. If you are interviewing, hit me up. I will do a mock interview for you. I will,
awesome.
and I will help you. There's a lot of people like myself. There's another individual. I don't know if it was Jace, might've been Jace, but he's at Apple and a bunch of folks where he's put out, and he's like, I will help you. I will mentor you. Seek out those opportunities. Get in on Twitter, and can be a cesspool. It can be a problem, but there's also really pockets of really great. There's a lot of engineers, a lot of developers out there that want to help people succeed. We want people to find this career. We want people to be, happy and successful. And so seek that out. But while you're doing that, attend meetups if you can, if you've got the free time to do it. If not, participate in discussions on Stack Overflow, and integrate yourself into the community, because that's where you're going to meet people. I don't know the last time I got a job where I didn't know somebody in the company that hired me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's really hard as a junior engineer, but it can become easier if you engage in certain communities. So open source is another really, really good way to build that network. And, and I want to say that there's a lot of, like, as a white dude, it's a lot easier for me sometimes to participate in communities than it is for people who are, either represent, women or other or less represented people. But there are good people out there that want you to succeed. And sometimes, I won't tell you that it's always going to be, you're not going to run into trolls and idiots, because you are, but there are people out there that want you to be successful. And so engaging in those communities early, in your career, build your network. And that was what I was getting to, the mistake I made. I'd never believed in the power of the network, not the like computer network, but your personal network. And your personal network really is everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it maybe not be everything, but it's really, really, it'll make your life much easier.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you don't ever have to meet folks. I've mentored people that I've never met, and I've helped them prepare for interviews with people I've never met. And some of them have been successful, and some of them probably I didn't do a good job, whatever, but that's what I would say. If you're junior, and I know that I imagine a lot of your students are, trying to balance a bunch of different things. And I hate to add one more thing in there, but that would be it for me. It'd be get involved in some facet of the community to meet people, learn from them, and then give back what you can when you can. And that creates this virtuous cycle where, you're going to meet somebody at some point and they're going to be like, hey, my friend is hiring over here, or my friend has an opening and it's a promotion for you. I think you'd be a good fit. And that's what allows me to go back to Google and be like, I haven't met this person in person, face to face, but we have been working together online over 3 months. And I really feel like you should give them a conversation.
That's cool.
So,
I know there's so many, like, I think getting your point about open source or, finding people, I think I've had the experience before, just like, say I just got interested in some random thing, very, very niche, could be some small little, doesn't have to be some really important new technology or whatever. Someone has like a repo that like, oh, that's kind of cool what they did. People love to get attention. Like if you like say post an issue or say, hey, I've been using your thing and I have I found a bug, or would you like some help documenting, your API, or, there's so many ways of like, if you just kind of care about something, even if it's something small but a couple other people also care about it, you can all of a sudden like have a little community of people that are working on something together, and it's really fun, and it helps you grow a lot too, I think, because other people have new ideas that you can get exposed to.
Yeah, and that part about the documentation or filing bug, I mean, anything you can do that brings value back to the project is appreciated, right? And it can just be like, I use it and I'm really fastidious about documenting bugs, and providing that input. And like I say, this idea of learning in public, which I really haven't defined, but if you are learning something and you're writing you like go back to React. I'm learning React and I want to write a to-do list. Well, why not write a blog about that while you're learning? Why not write down what you were learning? Why not write down the steps you went through and the resources you found and the problems you encountered and how you got through them? And you throw that up on, Dev2 or Medium or any one of those blogging platforms, and then you share it on your social media. And maybe you don't get a lot of views the first time, but maybe over time, you help some people out, right? You're giving back and you're learning and you're honing your writing skills and you're honing your storytelling skills and you're honing your engineering skills and you're contributing back into a larger community. None of that is bad. All that is good.
Yeah. And, I think we had one of our participants, who is working on an user authentication for Node, and he had worked through the problem himself, but he just created like a set of like 5 videos to show what the way he'd solved that problem, and he shared it with our other participants, and it was really great. Like he did a great job of sharing that. I'm sure he learned a lot too by just having to explain it to somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, there's a budding developer advocate right there. I mean, that's exactly kind of what we do, right?
Yeah.
We see problems and we document them and we share them. Sometimes we see those problems, sometimes we get them from our customers.
Yeah, great. So, I love your idea about this interview training stuff. I think it's something that we've promised our participants, down the road. It would be, maybe I should hook up with you and your network of people, if we can find some people to help people do these kind of one-on-one simulations of interview training, that would be great. I'd love to set up something so that our participants can get more access to something like that.
Yeah, I think we could definitely recruit a handful of folks to help people. The coding interview is daunting, right? That is the thing that you hear a lot of people talk about, this whiteboard interview, and whether or not whiteboard interviews are good or bad. Unfortunately, right now they are. I guess me saying unfortunately leads you to see which way I feel about it. I think interviewing and being able to articulate your ideas and be able to answer questions succinctly, the right amount of detail and to present yourself in the best possible light. All of those are skills like any other skill. And I think it requires a degree of practice to get good at them. Right. So anything I can do to help, I'm happy to do that. I think that's something I'm super, that's kind of what I'm focused on, I guess, a lot these days, is just making sure that people have the opportunity to showcase themselves in the best possible light.
That's great. Yeah, very cool. Well, why don't we look for some questions here? We had someone posting on our Slack channel. Elvis said that Google's known to be one of the best companies to work for. I think they have been rated like that before. And they know it's very competitive to get in. Is there a fighting chance for someone who's new or just coming out of a boot camp or with an alternative background that's not traditional to get into a company like Google?
Yeah, 100%. Like I mentioned, we have our own internal program that's essentially a boot camp, right?
Okay.
Google's also done a lot. Oh, you good?
Someone's at my door. I'm gonna pause my bit. You can answer the question. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I will do that. So Google's also, and I'll try to find the link to the program, but we've also committed to a bunch of free training and a bunch of pathways to build skill sets that would get you hired at Google. Now, that being said, like taking that course doesn't guarantee that you get into Google, right? Again, it's going to come back to how you present yourself in the interview and a bunch of other things. But absolutely, I do believe, I don't think I'm misspeaking when I say that I work directly with some folks who came out of boot camps. I'm pretty sure that's true. I also work with folks who have PhDs from the best computer science universities in the world. So there's a spectrum of people at Google. The thing about Googlers is that, generally speaking, we love the technologies we work on. We have an attribute that they call googliness, which is a lot of that's focused around empathy and kind of just the way we treat and respect other people. So there's a lot of facets, but you can technically prepare yourself to work at Google through a boot camp or self-training or any number of different ways. And like I said, I will try to find those programs that Google introduced, and I'll send them over to Mike and Jawan, and they can share them with y'all on that free training.
Very cool.
But yeah, definitely. And if you land an interview at Google, go on Twitter, go on wherever, and ask a Googler to help you prepare, and we will do it. And I think you can actually even ask your recruiter for that if you get an interview.
When I interviewed at Google, I got called by a recruiter because I entered the Code Jam, which is like a international coding competition. I was just playing around with it for fun. I did not do well, but Google had recruiters just go through the list of anyone who submitted anything at all, I guess. And then when I interviewed at Google, there was a class. Like they said, hey, we're offering an interview class. You can come and we'll tell you all about how the interview will run, and you can go through a simulated interview. And nobody's taking they're not measuring your your abilities in that course, and it was just there for your benefit. So yeah, there's a lot of support from Google to help people on board and get hired.
I mean, I think generally speaking, if you think about recruiting and what recruiters have to do, it's very competitive to hire talent into these companies. And so if they identify you and they bring you in for an on-site or for a phone screen, they want you to succeed. Everybody in that process wants you to succeed.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's going to get hired or get an offer. But the hope is that if we've identified you, that we're going to be able to, have you join our team. We're not out there interviewing people to waste anybody's time.
Right.
I will say the most important thing you can do for any interview for any company is to understand if there are nuances to the way that company interviews. right? Like AWS or Amazon has a very specific interview process. They have something called the Amazon leadership principles. And if you don't know those forward and backwards before you go in your interview, you're probably not going to do as well as somebody who has spent the time, maybe done a mock with somebody, but who has at least studied the leadership principles, right? And there's, like I said, there's people out there that want you to be successful and will help you. But definitely, just like you shouldn't send the same resume in for every job posting, you should be looking at how you can tailor that to be applicable. You should definitely understand if the company you're working with has specific ways they like to interview or specific things they're looking for.
Yeah. So is Google doing more remote hiring since COVID? It's at, I think when I was there, it wasn't necessarily easy to get a remote job. And you kind of had to be near one of the dev centers, depending on what you wanted to work on.
I know that we are, like a lot of companies, we are evaluating how people work and where they work and what's successful. I think there's, my role was naturally a remote role because when it's not COVID, when it's, back in 2019, I was traveling 100 nights a year, right, for work. And so,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. Right. And so from that perspective, it didn't, I was traveling so much that, having an office doesn't necessarily make sense.
Yeah.
Right. And I've worked remotely, for like 10 of the last 13 years or something like that. It's just the way it's worked out for me. And through my network, I have worked with some of the same people who have seen me be successful in remote roles. Right. And because the person I worked with at this company was the hiring manager at this company, where I worked with this person who was at this company when I went to work for them, like that they knew that was something that I could accomplish. But I do believe, yes, you will see the ability to work remotely at more companies. I think it's going to be role specific. I think it might be even a little bit level specific. And I think you're going to see some roles where it's just like, no, we need you here in the office 5 days a week. It's just the way the role is. And we're going to have other ones where we don't expect you to be in the office ever. We expect you to be out on the road. And so you can just work from your house. So I do think that, there's this realization that, forcing everybody to move somewhere where real estate prices are astronomical and the cost of living is huge, that you put a lot of stress on people in those environments if that's not really where they want to be, and that's not your best employee. Your best employee is the person who has a tremendous work-life balance, and that means when they're at work, they can really focus on their work because they know that everything else around them is taken care of. And that, I think, is what makes, I've worked for a lot of really good companies where I've, almost any company I've worked for, I would go back to again. I've had really good luck that way. But I will say that, at Google, we really do want you to be able to bring your whole authentic self to work every day, right? We want you to be who you are. And the best way to do that is by making sure that we have the programs and the philosophy in place that allows people to really strike a good work balance. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to have some weeks where you're working 60, 70 hours because like there's just a crunch, like you just have to, but that's not your life, right? Yeah. That's the anomaly, the rare anomaly.
Well, we had a question about machine learning, statistical modeling, and deep learning, asking for, where to find people to hang out with or tech groups, that they could find people, or LinkedIn groups, things like that. I don't know if do you have any information about any of those things?
I don't, but I know that some of my colleagues are on Twitter that you can follow. Sarah Robinson is a woman who does a lot of stuff with machine learning.
Oh yeah, I know her.
Yeah, she's a Googler. And I think
we work together.
Yeah. So
she's also a baker.
Yes, she's a baker, and she did a machine learning. She did a blog post on can machine learning bake a cake or something, like where
it came up with the recipe. I think the recipe list or something like. She generated it with some AI.
Yeah. So what I would say is, if you can find Sarah on Twitter, then you can start, and then you can start following her, and then you can see who she interacts with, and you can start building it out that way. I think she's a good follow. It's not a space that I spend a lot of time in because it's not. It's something I have an interest in, but I'm not an expert in it. So
right. That's kind of dabbling with.
Yeah, I'm just sort of. But I would just say, find some folks that work on that. And I wish I had more names for you right now, but let me see if I can figure some out and
yeah,
send
we can
them
always
over.
share some things on Slack with people later. So if we had some more.
Yeah, it's a tremendous field. I know that one of my colleagues at AWS, Emily, she's running product over at a machine learning company now, or an AI company. So I know there's a few folks out there that have tendrils in that world.
Great. We had another question on. So do developer advocates do you have the same kind of software engineering interview that like a software development role would have?
It depends on the company. I think that like, so at Google, I was giving two whiteboard questions.
Yeah.
Right. I think that the recruiter was like, you're not going to have whiteboard coding. We're going to do a lot of focus on systems design.
Okay.
And I actually ended up having a couple of whiteboard questions, but I also believe that I was evaluated differently than someone who was going to come in and be day-to-day software engineer. Right. So I think it's company dependent. And it also depends on the particular developer advocate role that you're going into, right? If they expected me to go in and work alongside software engineers on, deeply into the Python community, right, then they would expect me to be a Python expert, right? That's not what they were hiring me for, right? They were hiring me more for like my operations background. So the answer to that is the answer to every complicated question, which
it depends.
It depends, right? Which customers hate, but it's almost always the right answer.
Yeah. One thing I didn't ask you about, like, what are you working on now? What is your job? Are there certain? I know the Google Cloud is like such a big, so many different services. It is a little daunting, both Amazon and Google and Microsoft all offering so many services. What's your niche in cloud stuff? What are you working on?
So I work for Google Cloud, and my niche is in the containers Kubernetes space.
Okay.
And specifically, it's around how do we take applications that have been written on other platforms and get them into the cloud, get them into containers. So it's a process that most people call migration and modernization, right? So how do we take, so-called legacy applications and move them into the modern world of cloud computing, either just by what we call lifting and shifting them, or by refactoring them into microservices and all that stuff. So my background, my area of focus is Kubernetes containers, and specific to that, application migration and modernization.
Okay.
And so, in my day-to-day, like, what am I doing? So today I'm going to actually work on redoing a video. I did a video for the ability to use Google Kubernetes clusters on a different cloud provider, and it was in alpha when I wrote it, but we've released it, and I need to update the video. I also have to do a video on a new feature that we just released that was preventing, before it was hard to run migrated containers on a specific version of GKE. We've fixed that, so now I'm going to write a video on how we fixed it and what are the implications for your application migration story. I'm also writing an ebook on migration and modernization, and what are the major patterns of migration and modernization. Wow. And how do you, why would you move to the cloud? What should you think about before you move to the cloud? And then if you're going to move to the cloud, what are the ways to get your existing applications up there? And then once they're up there, what can you do with them? Last week I did a 2-hour workshop on our Anthos product for a big pharmaceutical company. I've done webinars. I'm also supposed to write a blog for those videos I talked about. I'm supposed to write some accompanying blogs to go with them.
Are your videos out on YouTube on the Google developer channel, or where can people?
Yeah, I've got some videos up there on what's called Migrate for Anthos, and another product called KF. So I've got a handful, like 6 or 9 videos. I've only been at Google now for about 9 months.
Okay.
So
okay.
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely, if you go up on YouTube, you can find my bearded face smiling at the camera in some sort of awkward thumbnail pose where they're like, yeah, hey, they actually make you do those.
Yeah. But I do appreciate so much like the content that Google puts out. It's just there's some really great content no matter what kind of thing you're trying to learn. So
yeah, I mean, that's the other thing too. There's a ton of good free content on almost any technology you want to learn. It's up there. Now, you may not vibe with the instructor or the way that material is presented, so you may have to find, like, there's some presenters I really love and some presenters that their style and mine don't mesh, and I'm not everybody's cup of tea either, right? So it keeps, if you find a subject that you like, but you find a video that you don't really like, it just doesn't click with you, you can't get through it, look for another presenter, because there's different styles resonate with different people.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, we are kind of out of time, and I want to respect everyone's time commitment this morning. But thank you so much, Mike, for kind of sharing your background, and I would definitely love to follow up with you as we develop our program more about the aspect of interview training and things like that. You know, I think you're right that there is a network of people out there that we can connect with and give people that kind of one-on-one practice that would be really helpful. So, and
yeah, like I said, yeah, 100%.
Great. And if you had some, I think you had a link on any data analytics groups or something like that. If we'll forward that on if we find some other stuff. So, all right.
Yeah, I will. I'll reach out to some of my colleagues and get that info and send it back over to y'all.
Thank you so much. All right, Mike. I'll have a great day, and thanks for talking with us.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Yeah, it's a great way to kick off my Monday. So thank you for the opportunity, and I really appreciate it.
All right, awesome. Okay, bye.
Bye.